Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett. Our guest in this episode grew up with an old-fashioned drive-in speaker planted in the middle of his Adelaide backyard. On Saturday nights, the kids gathered around in their pyjamas to listen to old Western movies that were flickering across the big screen over the back fence. It was an entertaining childhood, but who is he? He's been the chairman of the Fringe in Adelaide for the past 6 years. He's David Minear, next on OurTime. Welcome to OurTime. Great to have your company on this episode. Now, his father, Harold Minear, not only managed the Tapleys Hill Road Drive-In, he also worked in the advertising industry and as an actor, a director and a producer. So it's hardly surprising that David has made his own mark in similar fields. David Minear, welcome to OurTime.
Malcolm, a pleasure to be here.
I know.
No, it is. Really
David,
good.
that is such a great story about you living behind a drive-in movie.
Absolutely true. I mean, it was Dad sort of opened up. He was the manager for the Shannon Drive-In on Tapleys Hill Road, and our house.
I remember going there.
Well,
why didn't you invite me in for
We
tea?
never left home to go. It was it was like early days Foxtel, you know. It was quite amazing. But no, it literally was. There was a speaker, like a whole speaker set in the middle of the lawn, and there it was every night. Unbelievable. It was wonderful. A wonderful few years.
Did you have a good view though? Was it sideways or?
No, it was, well, I mean, I was pretty young at the time, so it looked really big, larger than life. And I guess that larger than life fact is something that's driven me all along, you know, sort of the whole idea of theatre and arts and film and music or whatever. So,
but your father obviously had a huge influence because of the diversity of what he did on your life.
He was amazing. I mean, truly a spectacular character in the sense that he, you know, obviously had a large family that he had to keep sort of feeding and keeping alive and keep moving forward. But his passion for the theatre in particular sort of started at a very young age. I mean, he first appeared on stage at the age of 4.
And we have a photo of that. And these are great, these shots, you know, of when people first started in the business. And there he is. What was he called? Little
Harold. And he would go on and do acts on stage. And his mum, Eva, was on stage many years, obviously, before him. But
it clearly was his mum next to him, though.
That's not his mum. No, it was a good friend of the family's forever, for a very long period of time. So it was a very close-knit community of family, and they all did these shows forever and ever and ever, and it's absolutely fantastic.
And this is him slightly older.
Yeah, slightly rounder, no longer Little Harold.
That's not on a telly show or something.
I think it might have been when
it looks like a TV set
on
to
Channel
me.
7 or Channel 9 when he did a pantomime show. I can't remember which station it was.
Right.
In the 60s.
Right. Oh, it says that in an hour-long pantomime.
Yeah, so it must have been television an hour long.
Of course, we all grow older as time goes on. And here he is. I think this is probably as I saw him last, actually.
It's a beautiful shot of him because it just shows, I mean, a beautifully aged man who had a great life, who still had a massive zest for life, an amazing awareness of life, of all the people in his life. I mean, he was a great man till the very end and sort of died in his sleep one afternoon. So it's great.
Well, and this next shot is of the family, of you and your wife.
Yep, and Mum and Dad. And it's very special. That was taken on his 91st birthday. So not that long ago at all. And he was a mad Crows supporter, which he would be very upset with.
I hardly noticed that.
Exactly. No, very
good.
But
he's a man that's very much associated with theatre here in South Australia and so many other things. Yeah. But your association there with your wife, where did that happen?
Well, one day when I was working at Channel 9 in publicity and promotion, somebody came around and said, you should check out the new sort of young lady on the reception. So I did, and so here we are sort of 50 years later, but we're still together. The rest is history.
Just talking about Dad again though, but you're compiling some information about your dad?
No, in fact, in the last couple of years before he died, he actually wrote his own memoir. And I'm literally in the moment proofreading that, fixing it together, pulling a few things together, getting the photography sorted out for it, and we're going to print it in the next couple of months. And so mainly as a gift for sort of family and close friends. But it's a wonderful book because it's written as he spoke. And It's a beautiful memory of all the stories and all the journey he's been on and his respect and love and appreciation for the theatre and also all the people he worked with. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing.
And really, that's the way you want it to sound like the way he spoke, like you just said. When you sort of homogenise it all, it just sort of loses. When you can hear the person talking to you.
It's exactly how it's written. You know, it's really amazing, and I think it's a joy for me. I mean, obviously my family was very sad when Dad passed away, But when you read this, you go past sadness and you realise what a wonderful, incredible life he had. And then you think about all the connections he made and all the people he touched and all the things that he did and all the theatre involvement. And so it's absolutely magical.
It is, but we all should do this. We all should do this for our families and our friends, because the history of our life is never going to be repeated again, and it's going to be lost after a generation if something isn't there to either hand down or...
You make a good point. You should do the same for yourself.
I'm doing it.
Good to hear.
Only because our lives, it might be about us, but our lives also tell what was happening around us at the time, if it's well written, I think.
Well, it's a very, in fact, there's a lot of history in the sense of Dad's writing. And funny, you mentioned about the drive-ins. Of course, in the 50s, they were doing really, really well. But sort of in the late 50s, television arrived and killed off the drive-ins.
And the 20s, everyone's wishing they still had the drive-in.
Exactly. I agree. Bring them back, I say.
Yes. Now, your dad had obviously an effect on you because he obviously gave you a zest for life and for getting out and finding what was going to happen to you.
Look, he was marvellous. I mean, many things in my life, there are very strong parallels. I mean, I appeared in a few theatre shows when I was in my teens and so forth. When I dropped out of university, my dad wasn't very happy with me and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I'd like to get into advertising." And of course, he had a career in advertising at that point, so he hit the roof. "What do you want to get into advertising for?" So the irony is there that I had a relatively successful career in advertising, as did he. So there's a lot of simpatico in our journeys.
So you've been, we sort of go to the end now and we'll go back to the middle in a minute. So you've been the chairman of the Fringe. What does that really mean?
Well, firstly, it's a privilege. I mean, the Adelaide Fringe is an amazing, sort of wonderful, incredible sort of beast in a positive sense. I mean, it's so adored and sort of loved by the people of Adelaide and South Australia, but it's also just a great opportunity for creativity and a journey for artists to give them a platform and showcase. It's eclectic. It brings audiences to new artists. It brings audiences to shows to start with. And so it's really a privilege to have had this role for the last 6 years, sort of, for an event that's so wholeheartedly loved by the people of Adelaide and South Australia.
Well, I think the Fringes are very much like that around the world now, because people talk about the Fringe, the performers are travelling from Fringe to Fringe. Yeah. There's almost like the old vaudeville circuit.
There's a circuit. In fact, circuit's the right word, exactly what it is. From Edinburgh around to Adelaide, halfway around the world, I mean, that's pretty much the journey. I can't remember how many there are now.
And all sorts of places in between.
There's 260 around the world that I'm aware of, you know, and Edinburgh is the biggest and Adelaide's the second biggest, so that journey's quite interesting. Yeah. And every city would like to have a powerful Fringe because it adds to the vibrancy of the city and the place, and gives a lot of employment and enjoyment to a number of people. But
the position is a limited position because you've only got a certain time.
Yeah, as chair...
Why is that? Why?
Well, the Constitution was designed to give a maximum of 2 3-year terms to that role, and to any board role, in fact. Right. And I think rejuvenation is really, really quite important to an organisation like the Fringe. You can get... Creativity is actually an explosion ongoing, so you
get
want
a bit bogged down in.
So time for change, and I love it. I mean, I love the role, and and I love the fact that the horizon looks a bit sort of blurry at the moment with COVID and stuff. And I love the idea of taking on that challenge and doing it. But it's not going to be my turn; it's going to be somebody else's. But it's. But
is there something else where you can contribute within the?
I think I'll always, because of this experience over the last 6 years, I think I'll always be in and around the Fringe. You mentioned Frank Ford a little while ago, and when I met Frank, a very powerful character.
Just before you explain that, we were lucky enough on this program to get the last interview, sadly, before he passed. The interview was lovely. It's actually on our YouTube. Sorry, that's what I was trying to think.
That's
YouTube. Right. And it was great to talk with him because I got, for the first time, even though I was around at the time, I didn't really understand what was happening and how it originally happened. I remember going to Hindley Street to some vacant shops and seeing these shows that were very, this is a bit different.
Exactly.
Edgy, yes. And sitting on very uncomfortable seats thinking, this isn't like real theatre. Yeah. And it's just amazing how that's grown. But hearing his side of the story as to how and why and how difficult those early days were. Yeah. And now for you, where there's a real infrastructure in place.
And our challenge is constantly to build that infrastructure, to market, if you like, the Fringe, to build the umbrella for all the artists and the venues to sort of perform under. And it's hard, it's not an easy journey in a financial sense, but it's a worthwhile journey. So
So recently we also had Christy Anthony on the
great.
program, and we were talking about the amount of money that the entertainment industry as a whole generates in Australia and how much of it comes from the arts.
Yes.
But more particularly, how much of it comes from Adelaide and from the Fringe. And it was quite extraordinary seeing that graphic or the pie chart that you showed.
It's pretty powerful. I mean, in 2020, the Fringe was just finished. I think we produced about $100 million worth of economic benefit to the state, which included about $41 million in new money to the state coming from elsewhere, not just money spent around. So it's the box office was $21 million. So that was split, to the artists and venues. And in fact, the majority of that money, about $15 million of it, stayed with artists and venues in South Australia. So and that's money to South Australians they wouldn't normally.
And that's actually incredibly important because after the Fringe, Adelaide closes down for a month or two before everybody starts moving again and getting things out. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a time of the year that the weather is generally kind.
Yeah.
But what sort of things were you trying to help plan how and why if it rains or if there's a sudden whatever? How does that affect?
Well, I have a little bit of a joke with the previous chair, Judy Potter, who said it rained several times during her time as chair of the Fringe, and it didn't rain once. I mean, it rained at the beginning and the very end, but not in the middle. So I got through very, very well. But no, it goes with it. I mean, the hot weather is not a problem. People still come out in hot weather because most of the venues now are air-conditioned or better air-conditioned than they used to be. Rain does have an effect. It pushes people away a little bit. But overall, people go. They know they're in for a good time. They know it's Adelaide. They know it's South Australia. It's not going to last for a long time. So they go and enjoy themselves.
Okay, there's so much to talk about in that area and your life. And we'll be back in a moment to do just that. Our special guest is David Minear. David, we're talking about your position with the Fringe, but this is a culmination of a life spent doing a myriad of things.
I've been lucky.
Absolute myriad. When did you start? How old were you when you started working?
Well, it's ironic. It's 50 years ago last week. So in 1970.
So you were one at the time. Is that the story you're trying?
I wish it was true. I'm 67 now. But I mean, I started working in the advertising department of Minear for a year. I was fortunate enough a year later.
Actually, the same time I was.
There we go. I snap again.
Yeah.
And in a year later,
I didn't know you then, though.
No. A year later, I was at Channel 9 for 4 or 5 years, and then sort of snuck into
and I was there too at that time.
Snuck into a couple of advertising agencies, and ultimately to work for an agency in Adelaide called Young and Rubicam. I started as a junior copywriter there, and I had 26 years with them here and around Australia and around the world, and it was a fantastic journey.
Yes, we've got some shots of that too, which is sort of interesting to see you growing up because, we talking about writing your own story, doing your dad's, you better start doing your own. This was...
Back in the early days of Wino, this must have been around about the 1982, 85 when I came back from, I've been creative director in Wino in the Caribbean. And that's sort of when I came back to Adelaide.
Oh, just casually drops in the Caribbean.
And so that was a good time. And I just come back and we had a great purple patch there for a long time. That was in the early 90s when Young and Rubicam had really established itself quite strongly. That was the creative director at the time, Neil Lawrence. I was the managing director. And that guy leaning against the car over there is Peter Falk, the actor. So for Lancer. But we were agency of the year for many years in a row then. So the 80s creatively were a wonderful journey for me. Then management in the 90s, and we did some great things.
Well, in everything, actually. There was a lot of stuff happening in the 80s as well.
Making a commercial in my early days somewhere, sort of directing the director. Terrible thing to do, but directing the director.
Can't possibly imagine who would ever do that. Which one are you with the O&M?
Yeah, that's me with the long hair.
With the long hair?
Yeah,
in disguise?
In disguise.
Didn't we all have long hair?
We did.
Nothing's changed.
No, good times, very good times, lots of memories. And I love the production process. I love writing, I love producing it, and I love creating it and sort of being part of it. And to work with people like Street Remley, who was just such a gem of a man who taught me so much at a young age about writing, about production, and he was also the first creative director of Y&R Adelaide. So I always looked up to him as a massive inspiration.
He was a guy you always wanted to go and do a voiceover for.
Absolutely.
It's the truth. Okay, so this overseas part, the New York part of your life, how did you end up there, working there?
I was working in Puerto Rico really, but I spent a great deal of time flying backwards and forwards from Puerto Rico to New York. So it was a wonderful time. I really rate New York as a great city. in many ways, and I've spent many years or much time there. But it's just a very special place. And Y&R was very kind to me. I worked with the very top people within Y&R, got exposure to them, so that's why I got put back to Adelaide, different roles I had within Australia. Creative director, managing director, national creative director, vice chairman, and so on.
There's another whole thing going on in your life as well at the time. That's now the name of your company.
As in Bombora? Yeah, I've always had a massive fascination for music. I'm addicted to it. I mean, I have far too many CDs, iPods, Spotifys, LPs. So somewhere in the early 2000s, I decided to set up my own record label called Bombora, which is for a wave that breaks outside the normal surf line. So it had a lot of sense to it, and ended up turning into a surf music record label, old man surf music. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. A lot of thunder and drums and loud guitars.
Well, yes, but do you surf?
In my mind.
Right. So the music helps you to cut through that wave.
Yeah, it's the vision, the vision to create.
The vision.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not a very good surfer, but I adore my music.
Where did that come from, do you think?
I don't know.
Did you see a surf movie on the big screen while you were listening in the back garden or something?
There's certainly a bit of that. I have a vague memory of the first time I ever heard there's an instrumental track called Bombora by the Atlantic, so I have a vague memory when I first heard that.
Was that the...
You've got the sound. You've got the sound. So it was very, very good. So it just sort of seemed to sit with my life, and music. In some ways, music was a bit like my theatre was in the sense for Dad, or his theatre, and it was a driving force, a thread in my life. Always has been.
See, what's interesting in just listening to you talk about your dad and yourself, so many people think all to do with television or the theatre is about being in front of the camera or being on stage, but without the people that work behind it, that promote it, that are on the boards, that raise the money and so on, not everybody realises how many people there are behind the scenes. You only ever see that tip of the iceberg, because that's what it is, isn't it?
It's so true. I mean, creative industries, you have great creative people up front. You need great creative people, risk takers, people who can work within that system, producers and directors. Television is a great area, music's a great area, theatre's a great area. The Fringe is another one. The team that we have within the Adelaide Fringe and the board that I have working around me for the last 6 years, absolutely outstanding. They do so much heavy lifting as to what happens over the journey of a Fringe. It's quite astronomical. People only see the front.
Yes.
The good bit.
The very point, yes. The very point.
But no, it takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of commitment by those people to do it,
So what are you going to do when you grow
up? I'm a bit frightened to grow. I'm always reminded of that David Niven from The Moon is a Balloon, where he sort of, at the end of the book, where he was sort of talking away, and then someone said, well, he lived in fear. He said, I've lived in fear all my life. I keep thinking someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and I'm going to turn around and the person's going to say, hey, it's about time you got a real job. And that's me. That's sort of how I've been.
Isn't that the secret of life?
Yeah, I've never really had a job, I think, but I've worked pretty hard.
Yeah.
So,
but you've loved what you did.
Total addiction, total fascination.
A reason to get up every morning.
Work is not hard for me. I enjoy and absorb work, and I like it, and sort of it's part of who I am.
Do you think our industry are lacking people like yourself, or are there a lot of people coming up to, like who's going to take your place, for example?
Yeah, well, that will be revealed in a short period of time, the new chair. But I think deep down there are a lot of good people who have a lot to give on all facets of the arts or advertising or music or film, whatever. They're there. They're just
really,
an opportunity.
It's giving the public more than bread and butter, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And it's also taking a risk on the person you're not quite sure about and give them a go. You don't have to be sort of formal and educated and all the credentials. You just think you have to be passionate and have some sort of degree of common sense and some energy and push to make things happen. A lot of people
to engage. It's
exactly a lot of people. You have to have respect for the art form in which you're working, but as long as you're committed to it, away you go. I think the problem we all suffer from in the arts or creative industries is we often let emotion become the driver and not always common sense. We have to sort of learn to balance emotion with some common sense, and I think that's characteristics I look for in people when I'm sort of trying to hire for particular aspects.
Do you want to continue in this vein for the rest of your life, your working life, or are you looking to sort of steer your career in a different direction? Because there are many facets to you.
Yeah. No, I'm lucky because I think I can jump between certain disciplines, creative disciplines, and still do them. So I will. I mean, I'm interested in sort of filmmaking. I'm interested in pushing my music a little bit further. I'm still very much interested in the theatre and stuff. So I don't know what the next journey holds for me. I would like to take a little long service leave for the next couple of months and sort of reassess.
What for?
Reassess.
You've had that with the coronavirus.
Coronavirus, yeah, absolutely true.
We've all had that.
I'm just freeing myself up a little bit to look forward to what I can do next. And whatever it is, I don't intend stopping. I mean, I'm a bit of a Forrest Gump in the sense of a bit of a runner, so I kind of like the idea of keep going. And I don't ever feel that retirement is a word that would ever sit comfortably with me.
Your dad didn't, did he, really?
I guess, again, parallel lines, you know. No, he was, he was
well,
working on his memoirs up until, you know, the last couple of months of his life.
You know, for anybody who's considering writing their memoirs, I would recommend it because it gives you a chance to sort of relive your life. And we forget what's happened to us. You know, we can we can live, in your opinion, a mundane life. Yeah. You can live, you think no one will be interested in this.
Exactly.
But the reality is the fact you lived through a time and these things happened in that time that affected us to do whatever we did. We're going to come back with David in just a minute. We have some great photos to show you of the running man. Our special guest is David, and we'll be back in a tick. Our special guest is the son of Harold Minear, David Minear.
Oh, here we are.
There you go. One of the things that you've always wanted to do, I hear, is run.
Yeah,
Why, are you frightened of something?
Standing still. I'm frightened of standing still.
That's true.
I hadn't been much of a runner, but I ran a little bit in my 50s in City of the Bays and a few things like that. But I made up my mind that I was going to run a marathon for my 60th birthday. So,
and here's the photo of you looking. Are you exhausted?
That's about 200 metres from the finish line. That's me running.
You look older there.
I was a lot older when I started. That's 200 metres from the end of the New York Marathon. It was my ambition to run a marathon, so it had to be in New York for the obvious reason we spoke about before, New York. And that was just a moment before I saw my wife standing next to the Australian flag near the finish line. It was quite an emotional moment. Because
I bet it was.
I gave her a hug and a kiss and I said, I've got to go out here, I've got a race to finish. So that's what happened.
Oh, how brilliant.
It was marvellous.
What a lovely story. What a lovely life experience.
It was absolutely beautiful. It stays with me all the time.
And the other thing, it's always sad to say goodbye when you're in a show with the family that are around you, and I'm sure this is the same for you with the Fringe group. You sort of, a show or a job finishes and you say goodbye to the people that were your family for that period of time.
Yeah.
And this photo we've got at the Town Hall here in Adelaide was at the opening of the Fringe this year?
The opening of the Fringe this year.
It's a pretty shot, I like that.
It sort of sums up my time as chair of the Fringe. I love it for that reason as well. But I think you make a good point. I mean, it's like a theatre show. You know, the team that I've had around me for most of the last 6 years have been absolutely outstanding. All my board members, Heather Kroll as the CEO, the team and so on, absolutely magical people. So,
and what colour hair will she have this year?
That will be the trick question.
That will be the trick, yes. We all know that about Heather.
But it's been marvellous. So I really, really have appreciated time. And yes, I'm moving on, but the Fringe will go on.
Yes, it will. And for a long time, I suspect,
Forever.
because it's very much a part of our fabric here now.
I think it's also part of the self-esteem of South Australia. When the Fringe is on, I feel we all feel great about the state and everything. So it lifts our self-esteem.
Yes, but also we should be called the Festival State as a permanent name for the state because that's really what we've become.
I totally agree with you. I think it's part of our marketing, our tourism marketing, our energy, the Festival State, and that energy is very, very important to this state going into the future.
Well, there's a lot of energy coming from you. So, David, good luck for the future, whatever you turn your hand to, because I'm sure it'll be successful.
You're a great man, Malcolm. Thank you very much.
So are you. We'll just do this in a minute and say terrific things about each other. Look, it's been great to have your company with us today as well. And hopefully we'll see you next time on Our Time, where we'll have more fascinating people and stories to tell you about. So until then, keep yourself nice. We'll see you soon.